New this morning, 2 FBI agents have been shot at a barricaded home just a few miles from the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, where more than 2,000 members of the National Guard are on the ground right now. Protesters and police clashed in the street for a second night as hundreds gathered outside the police station. At one point, the group even flipped over a police cruiser and set it on fire. You see it right there. Officers say they had no other choice but to use tear gas and pepper spray to get the crowds under control. Despite that, last night was far less chaotic and destructive than Monday. By the way, those 2 FBI agents are in the hospital. They should survive, and we are being told the shooting is not related to these protests. Crystal.
And Ferguson residents are getting what many residents in Albuquerque have been wanting, hearing from the officer who pulled the trigger in the controversial shooting. Now, that officer, Officer Wilson, is breaking his silence for the first time.
After that, I paused and I again yelled, stop, get on the ground, giving him the opportunity to stop. And he ignored all the commands and he just kept running.
Last night, Wilson told the ABC's George Stephanopoulos that he fired the first shot as Brown charged at him. He then explains why he shot a second time.
I gave myself another mental check. Can I shoot this guy? Legally, can I? And the question I answered myself was, I have to. If I don't, he will kill me if he gets to me.
For now, there's no word if Wilson will be returning to the police force. And this morning, we are learning more about the evidence that led a grand jury to not indict Wilson. Evidence presented showed bruises on Wilson's face, which was argued that it was proof Brown attacked Wilson, punching the officers several times, and that's why Wilson feared for his life. Wilson also described a struggle for his gun. The teen was shot in his right hand. Blood drops showed how far Brown ran before turning around and charging at Wilson.
And the decision not to indict the police officer has protesters upset all around the country. In fact, they were out in more than 170 different cities overnight. In New York, a huge group marched past Times Square. In Los Angeles, hundreds of protesters shut down a busy interstate and part of the 101. And farther north in Oakland, it was a very different story, where thousands of protesters have set fires, looted businesses, including a car dealership and a cell phone store. And for a second night, folks here in Albuquerque were on the street as well.
Yeah, this protest much larger as hundreds of marchers even forced a busy intersection to be shut down.
I think it's going to send a message that citizens are tired of police violence, living in a police state.
Around 6:30 last night, police were forced to stop traffic on Central and San Mateo because there were so many protesters. At one point, some protesters started kicking a car and others were seen shouting and spitting at state police in riot gear. The officers stood silently. Some people even criticized how the protesters acted.
If you want sympathy, you don't gain it by off everyone around you. And there may be medical emergencies here. There may be all kinds of things. But in proving your point, you are losing.
Now, we learned it was intentional to have state police instead of APD controlling the crowd because many of the marchers were protesting APD shootings.
Just keep going.
Then some of those state police officers were surrounding the APD substation up in Nob Hill. They wanted to avoid what happened back in March. That was after APD shot and killed James Boyd in the foothills. Remember then, protesters were out for 12 hours, threatening officers, climbing on top of the substation, blocking I-25 and spray painting the substation. Police used tear gas to break up that massive crowd. They did not do that overnight. Crystal.
And for the very latest on the protest in Ferguson, stay with KRQE News 13. We will have up-to-the-minute coverage on air and, of course, online over on our website. That's krqe.com.
All right, 6:05 now. And some other news this morning. Friends and family are still remembering 2 students from UNM who were killed in a car crash on Friday. They had a memorial at the Student Union building on campus last night. And afterward, the crowd released these balloons, all to honor Breonna Hillard and Matthew Grant.
It was a beautiful service, I guess you could say that always in tragic moments like this, it's really sad that this is the reason so many people come together, but then again, it's really beautiful.
It was very nice to see everybody go up there and talk on behalf of all of the Greek organizations and the friends and family of those who were lost.
Police say the 2 students who were killed died when Joshua Leal was speeding in this stolen truck and slammed into them on Rio Grande, just south of I-40. The 2 other UNM students who were hurt in the crash are now out of the hospital.
Albuquerque police are still on the hunt for whoever shot and killed a man earlier this week. They say Irvin Gaius and another man got into an argument Monday night around 8 on Indiana Street near Gibson. Then Gaius was shot and killed, and a 19-year-old was badly hurt. He is still in the hospital in critical condition this morning. And another pedestrian crash here in New Mexico. This one happened in Roswell last night about 6. Police say a woman was trying to cross Atkinson Street when an SUV slammed into her. The woman is in the hospital in serious condition this morning. Police say the SUV's driver will probably not face any charges.
Morning, while you were sleeping, 2 FBI agents were shot this morning in St. Louis County. They say it is not related to the protests in Ferguson, which are really just a few miles away from where the shots rang out. Both agents were rushed to the hospital. We are told they should survive. Meanwhile, police in Ferguson say the second night of protests resulted in about 44 people getting arrested, about half as many as last night. More National Guard troops were also called in following the looting and the fires all around the city on Monday. And this morning, the protests are popping up not just in Ferguson, but in cities all across the country and right here in Albuquerque.
That's right. All of this in response to the decision not to charge the officer who killed Michael Brown.
He has a constitutional right to burn the flag. He has a constitutional right to burn the flag. Freedom of speech.
The protest in Albuquerque started about 6 last night on Central and San Mateo. The crowd quickly grew to hundreds. The protest in response not only because of what happened in Ferguson, but also the police shootings here in Albuquerque.
I will not sit down, stand down for any police officer, any cop. This is my country, not theirs.
The march stopped at UNM, where we saw some people kicking a car. Police then closed down the intersection as the mob of protesters started blocking traffic. Later, several hundred people sat down in the street. When they started to march back towards San Mateo, News 13 watched as some of the protesters shouted obscenities at state police in riot gear, spit on them, and some of them pushed against their shields. Those officers stood silently and did not use any force against the crowd.
Also here in Albuquerque, the protesters, they're staying pretty peaceful overall, but it is not the case everywhere. Take a look. All right, in Los Angeles, protesters stormed the freeway. Right here, the 101. Take a look at that backup. Crowds even gathered downtown at LAPD's headquarters.
So I want my children to understand how to stand up, how to take power, how to not simply entrust a system that's been proven to be unjust.
All right, things also got out of control in Minneapolis, where someone drove a car through a crowd of protesters, hurting one woman. Protesters in New York were fairly calm as they marched through town from Times Square to the headquarters of the United Nations. And the whole world is watching Ferguson right now. That includes a UNM instructor who has turned the fallout into a teaching tool. Eric Turner is a PhD candidate at UNM. He teaches a class called Sociological Theory. He says Ferguson is particularly relevant here because the same issues that are going on there are also happening in Duke City.
Police officers put their lives on the line every day, serving and protecting for our communities. And, frankly, I don't think they get enough respect.
They need to have the training necessary to take care of situations like that non-lethally and without someone's life being taken.
Instructor for the class, Eric Turner, says he uses the APD shootings, particularly the one of killing James Boyd in the foothills, to teach students lessons in aggressive policing and institutional racism.
And for the first time since the grand jury made its decision, Officer Darren Wilson, the cop who killed Michael Brown, is speaking out.
The reason I have a clean conscience is because I know I did my job right.
Wilson sat down with the ABC's George Stephanopoulos last night to talk about that August night he killed 18-year-old Brown. He says he fired the first shots as Brown charged at him, then fired again, killing the teen. Wilson is not facing any charges for Brown's death. And for the very latest on the protest in Ferguson and here in New Mexico, stay with KRQE News 13. We will have up-to-the-minute coverage on air and, of course, online over on our website, krqe.com.
At 6:35, the finalization of the state's election results are on hold this morning. It's all because of a recount in the race for land commissioner. During a meeting with the state canvassing board yesterday, a recount was ordered between the incumbent Democrat Ray Powell and Republican challenger Aubrey Dunn. The latest totals provided by the Secretary of State's office show Mr. Dunn with a 704 vote lead. This will be the first recount for a statewide office since the state started a new law back in 2008 for automatic recounts when the margin between the top two candidates is, get this, so small it is less than 1/2 of 1%. State election officials also updated the board on voter turnout. Nearly 521,800 voters cast their ballots. That's just shy of 41% of registered voters. 6:36 now. Thanksgiving, it'll be here tomorrow, and many folks here, really all over the country, will be paying more for their meals. We gave you some tips on how to save on Turkey Day a little earlier. If you missed them, you can check it out at KRQE.com. But here's a question a lot of people are wondering: how can I eat cheap, and eat healthy? News 13's Catherine Rizzone went to go find out. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Matt, and that's a great question. And it can be easy to cut corners when you're trying to cut costs. But we talked to one local expert for tips as to how you can keep a few extra bucks in your wallet while watching your waistline.
Let's look through here, see what we have.
Even for expert mom and fitness guru Monica Bencomo, couponing for Thanksgiving dinner can be overwhelming. But she says stick with the plan, keep a budget, shop on a full stomach, and make a list of the essentials.
If you start off with writing a grocery list of fixed items that you know that you're going to need and want, that's going to help you narrow down where the best place is to go grocery shopping.
From there, think about cutting out foods or drinks with empty calories, like soda. Easy enough, right? But what about Thanksgiving staples that aren't so good for your waistline, like pie? Bencomo says if you can, make your own.
Whenever I make sweet potato pies, I get organic and or whole wheat pie crust, and I'll use natural sweeteners instead of the artificial sweeteners. There might be more calorie content in things like agave or raw brown sugar, but it's going to metabolize through your body so much better.
More simple substitutions? Use egg whites instead of whole eggs to cut out cholesterol. How about grapes instead of cranberry sauce for a sweet balance to your meal without the additives? Ever had mashed sweet potatoes? Bencomo says they're easier for your body to digest. And if you're having bread or tortillas, use whole grains instead of white flour. Despite what you choose for your Thanksgiving dinner, Bencomo suggests making it less of a feast and more of a meal. That can keep it healthy and save money. Now, Bencomo says another option for those keeping a close eye on their budget: choose one protein for dinner. So instead of buying both a ham and a turkey, take a vote. Majority rules. Back to you.
All right, pretty good ideas there, Catherine. Appreciate it. Ms. Bencomo also says making cooking fresh with produce instead of using canned fruits or vegetables is not only better for you, but it's actually a little bit cheaper. Okay, so we want to ask some local kids why they were thankful on this Thanksgiving week. Take a look and a listen to what they have to say.
I'm thankful for my mom and my dad and my two sisters. I'm thankful for learning at school. I'm thankful for Serenity.